30 seconds. That's all it took for dust, iron, and pride to turn a mining camp into a legend. A narrow lot off Fremont Street. 10 men. One order barked against the wind. Then a twin thunder of black powder that made the afternoon jump. We think we know the story. Tonight, we peel back the smoke and ask the one question that never stopped echoing in Tombstone. Who truly fired first? It is October 26, 1881. The sun rides hard. Boots grind cinders into the street. The undertaker keeps busy. The printers keep busier. In a town where a man can win a fortune by noon and lose it by supper, words travel faster than horses, and ugly words travel fastest of all. You can hear the town breathing. Mules snort at the hitching posts. Doors bang against their iron hinges. A saloon piano tries a ragged tune in a minor key. Somewhere a gambler laughs too loud. Somewhere a deputy tongues a busted tooth. And somewhere 5 cowboys are growing tired of listening to the Earps. Every famous gunfight begins long before the guns come out. It starts with pride, with politics, with rumors about stolen stock and soft law. It starts with a morning's whiskey and a man who can't let a slight shrink quietly. By afternoon, the stories have grown spurs. By 3 o'clock, they'll have teeth. This isn't happening in the OK Corral. The shooting will bloom beside C.S. Fly's photography studio, down a cramped throat of dirt, hemmed by board walls and horseflesh. A place that forces men close, where no one can hide from another man's eyes or muzzle. If you want heroes and villains clean as a church window, turn back now. The men walking toward this lot are lawmen who gamble, cowboys who dine with citizens, a sheriff who shakes hands with both sides, and a town caught between silver and order. No one here is simple. Nothing here will be either. Tombstone grew like a weed in a rain barrel, fast, stubborn, and a little crooked. 4 years earlier, it was brush and rock. Now it struts in tall, false fronts and tin eaves, the kind of town that survives on grit, luck, and the noise of money. On this day, the noise is louder than usual because trouble has been promised. Tombstone grew like a weed in a rain barrel, fast, stubborn, and a little crooked. 4 years earlier, it was brush and rock. Now it struts in tall, false fronts and tin eaves, the kind of town that survives on grit, luck, and the noise of money. On this day, the noise is louder than usual because trouble has been promised. There were army mules stolen months back. Accusations drifted toward the McLaury Ranch and their friends. A sheriff's race turned sour. A town marshal was killed earlier that year by a laughing drunk named Curly Bill Brocious, then cleared as accidental. Everyone picked a side and swore it was the right one. In the middle of it stands Sheriff John Behan, a handshake politician with a velvet voice and eyes that weigh every vote. And across the street, Town Marshal Virgil Earp, a soldier's posture wrapped in a gambler's coat. Between them, the Cowboys, brothers Frank and Tom McLaury, Ike and his kid brother Billy Clanton, the drifter, Billy Clybourne, men who can move cattle or pull iron with equal ease. In the middle of it stands Sheriff John Behan, a handshake politician with a velvet voice and eyes that weigh every vote. Across the street, Town Marshal Virgil Earp, a soldier's posture wrapped in a gambler's coat. Between them, the Cowboys, brothers Frank and Tom McClowry, Ike and his kid brother Billy Clanton, and the drifter Billy Clybourne, men who can move cattle or pull iron with equal ease. At sunup, Ike Clanton made his rounds, whiskey on his breath, and words that could cut a saddle. He got himself disarmed, cuffed, and fined, walking out of court with dust on his pride and a promise on his lips. There'll be a fight. Promises like that have a way of keeping themselves. By early afternoon, the Cowboys drift toward the narrow lot near Fly's studio. Horses sweat against the fence. Spurs tick. A Winchester leans where it shouldn't. Sheriff Behan steps lively between the groups, says he'll settle it, tells the Earps he's disarmed the Cowboys. It will not prove so. Virgil Earp gathers his brothers, Morgan and Wyatt, and the thin, consumptive gambler with a surgeon's hands and a killer's calm, John Henry Doc Holliday. Virgil doesn't like the math, armed men milling within a block of the business district. Duty says move. Pride agrees. They start down Fremont Street. Doc is pale but steady. Under that long coat, a short, ugly shotgun rides quiet. Wyatt carries himself like a man aware of every angle and every escape that doesn't exist. Morgan flexes a right leg that aches when the weather changes. Virgil's jaw is set hard enough to crack a tooth. They are not going to talk. They are going to end this. Citizens murmur in doorways. A teamster reins in his wagon. A gambler folds his hand mid-deal and edges outside for a better view. The air changes as the Earps draw even with flies. It gets thinner, as if the town itself is holding in its breath. They reach the mouth of the lot. Cowboys, Frank McClowry, straight and cold. Tom McClowry, alert and coiled. Billy Clanton, too young to be so hard. Ike Clanton, with the fight drained out since morning. Billy Clybourne, shifting from foot to foot, ready to be anywhere else. The Earps stop just close enough. Virgil raises his cane like a conductor and barks the words a marshal is paid to say. Throw up your hands. I've come to disarm you. For a breath, no one moves. Then the world speeds up. Wyatt's gaze locks on Frank McClowry. Frank's a better shot than most, and Wyatt knows it. Somewhere to the left, Billy Clanton's hand twitches toward a pistol that sits too easy on his hip. Morgan shifts his weight. Doc's coat flutters, revealing the dull twin mouths of a short shotgun. Sheriff Behan, breathless, squeezes in with a pleading hand. Hold on, boys, I've disarmed them. It is one of those sentences the future will make a liar of. Even as he says it, metal is rasping leather. Throw up your hands, Virgil repeats, louder now. Wyatt is already moving, his coat pulled back, his revolver angling toward Frank. Later, a dozen witnesses will swear to a dozen different truths about the heartbeat that follows. In this breath, all that exists are nerves and habit. The first two shots come so close together, they might as well share a trigger. One cracks where Billy Clanton stands. One punches toward Frank McClory. Then the alley erupts. Doc's shotgun blossoms fire and black grit at near contact distance, a thunder meant to end arguments. Tom McClory lurches, reels for the open street, then stumbles onward as if willing his legs to remember how to run. Morgan Earp jerks as a round tears into his right calf. Virgil hisses as a bullet flays across his shoulder. Frank McClory folds at the waist, hit in the belly by Wyatt's first shot, but he still drags his revolver level and answers, retreating toward the sidewalk, spitting lead through smoke at shapes more than men. Ike Clanton, who promised war at breakfast, has no stomach for it at 3 o'clock. He throws himself toward safety, hands high, mouth working with words no one hears under the roar. Clybourne follows the only smart rule in a gunfight. If you can run, run. Wyatt takes a step forward into the smoke, a cold, controlled machine. He shoots where Frank's muzzle flash was, not where Frank is now. In this crush, you fire at light and movement. The rest is prayer. Doc drops the empty shotgun like a snake that spent its poison. He goes to his hip for a nickel-plated revolver. Somewhere behind him, a spectator's window glass spits into the street. The alley has turned to thunder, each shot a hammer on an anvil in a cramped shop. Morgan, bleeding, braces on a bent knee and returns fire low and fast, sending chips of board and dirt into the air. Virgil tries to turn his body to shield his brothers, even as he keeps shooting. The formation they began with, shoulder to shoulder, has dissolved into the ugly mathematics of survival. Billy Clanton, hit but alive, fights left-handed, dragging his pistol up, pouring rounds from behind a horse. The animal screams and whirls, tearing the scene into chaos. For an instant, its flank shields everything worth living for. Someone yells, "I'm shot!" Someone else answers, "Keep firing!" But words are toys in this much noise. The lot becomes a room full of fists you can't see, striking from everywhere. The smell of sulfur claws the throat. The tongue goes dry as paper. Frank stumbles into the open, blood turning the front of his vest into a dark bib. He tries to raise his gun one more time, but somewhere between will and muscle, the strength leaves him. He folds sideways, like a man laying down to sleep where he stands. Tom McClory runs hard for Fremont Street, clutching himself as if he could hold the life in by main force. Shots chase him. He falters, stumbles against the telegraph pole, and crumples there to stillness that startles the crowd into silence between reports. Morgan drops to a hip, grins like a man who just remembered the punchline, and fires again. Virgil keeps moving, shouting orders out of habit, even though the noise wipes him away. The Earps do what trained men do under panic. They reduce the world to tasks. Billy Clanton clings to the fight. He shoots until he can't, his pistol lowering as if it suddenly weighs as much as a railroad tie. He sways, finds the fence with his shoulder, and slides down it, breathing hard and fast, and then slower. Wyatt steps through the last curls of smoke unmarked. In his wake, The echoes run out of bullets. For a heartbeat after the final shot, no one moves. Then the sound of the world returns. Herds trembling, women crying out from porches, a dropped hat rolling in small circles in the dust. The gunfight has lasted little longer than a man can hold his breath. 30 seconds, give or take. 30 shots, give or take. In a town that will never again agree on the order of those two truths. Stories are already forming behind the eyes of every witness, each one certain, each one flawed. Who fired first? If you stood with the Earps, you saw hands dive for iron the instant a lawful order was given. If you stood with the Cowboys, you saw lawmen open the ball with a shotgun and a pistol, rushing men who claimed they wanted to leave. The truth may be 2 shots fired at once by men who'd traveled too far to stop in the same instant. And in the clamor that follows, the horses calming, the bystanders finding their voices, the first messenger sprinting for a newspaper office, another fight begins. A fight over memory, over testimony, over which words will harden into the legend, printed and reprinted until they seem like the only possible version of events. The echo fades, and what's left decides the legend.
They lay the bodies out in an undertaker's window. 3 long boxes. 3 longer looks from townsfolk who can't decide if they've been protected or provoked. Behind glass, death is tidier. The smell stays in the street. The sight does not. The coroner gathers testimony. Then Judge Wells Spicer calls a preliminary hearing that becomes a second gunfight, this time with words, oaths, and blotched ink. The room is hot, the benches unforgiving, and every witness wears a bias like a Sunday suit. Sheriff John Behan testifies he tried to disarm the Cowboys. Others claim he never did. The contradictions pile like firewood, ready for one more spark. Wyatt sits straight as a fence post. He swears that when Virgil ordered, "Throw up your hands," Billy Clanton and Frank McClary moved for their guns. He aimed at Frank because Frank was the best shot. Virgil's words agree. The first 2 shots were nearly one sound. Billy's and Wyatt's overlapping in the narrow lot. Across the aisle, hostile mouths insist it began with the law. The judge listens until even silence sounds like testifying. Spicer weighs law against fear and fear against duty. He writes that the Earps and Doc were justified, officers acting to disarm armed men, not assassins running down enemies. He does not call them saints. He does not need to. The words justified and dismissed walk out of the courtroom like armed escorts.
But paper verdicts do not soak up blood. A few weeks later, an ambush in the winter dark tears Virgil off his feet and ruins his right arm forever. The shot comes from somewhere a lamplighter never reached. Tombstone wakes colder the next morning. Spring brings no mercy. Morgan Earp, playing billiards under gaslight, leans to take a shot and jerks under a rifle round that splits the felt and the family in one breath. Someone fires through a window, then runs. Morgan dies with a brother's hand under his head and a town's tolerance burned to ash. Wyatt changes shape. The lawman's center hardens into something the law can't carry. with warrants in one pocket and grief in the other. He rides after the men he believes murdered his brother. They call it a vendetta ride. The newspapers call it something worse. When the dust finally trails off behind his horse, Wyatt is a man some will toast, others will curse, and nobody will ignore. Myth. The gunfight happened in the OK Corral amid saddles and hay. Fact. The first shots cracked beside C.S. Fly's studio in a narrow lot that funneled men into each other. The corral's name rode the headline better, so the legend hitched its wagon to the wrong gate. Myth. The lawmen lined up at high noon like statues and outdrew the outlaws in a fair duel. Fact. It was close, messy, and fast. Shoulders brushing board walls, horses crowding, powder smoke blinding. Duels belonged to paintings. This belonged to splinters, shouting, and the stink of sulfur. Myth. Holliday opened the fight with a pair of iron-plated pistols, grinning like a stage villain. Fact. Doc started with a short shotgun hidden under his coat. Only after it spoke thunder did he reach for a revolver. Whether that thunder came first or in the same breath as a pistol crack depends on where you stood and who you believed. Myth. Tom McClory died unarmed, arms wide, pleading mercy. Fact. The record won't make up its mind. Some swore Tom showed he was unarmed. Others swore he fired from behind a horse. The hearing couldn't nail it down, and time hasn't either. Myth. Wyatt Earp walked through hell without blinking and without help. Fact. Wyatt didn't take a bullet, but his brothers did, and Doc bled. Coolness under fire isn't the same as walking alone. Those 30 seconds were a 4-man fight, with the cost paid in 3 other bodies. Myth. The hearing washed everything clean. Fact. Judge Spicer's decision set the law's position, not the town's heart. The ambush of Virgil and the murder of Morgan wrote a second verdict in lead, and Wyatt wrote his appeal on horseback. Myth. Who fired first has one answer if you look hard enough. Fact. 2 nearly simultaneous shots began it, one from the Cowboys' side, one from the Earps. Witness eyes, startled and stung by powder, sorted them afterward into the stories they already half believed. The real beginning was earlier. Pride, politics, and fear loaded the guns. Fingers only finished what feeling started. Walk out to Boot Hill in the late light and read the names. Billy Clanton, Tom McClory, Frank McClory. Wood bleaches, paint flakes, and the wind does what wind always does. Carry what it can and bury the rest. The markers stand anyway, because stubbornness is the only thing that outlasts a Tombstone afternoon. Back in town, the narrow throat of dirt behind Fly's looks smaller than you imagined. Close your eyes and count to 30, the way you did as a child. Somewhere around 15, you feel silly. Somewhere around 25, you'll feel time thin out. Somewhere around 30, you'll understand how brief a legend can be at its birth. Who fired first? Maybe the truest answer is that both sides did. 2 sparks leaping from the same friction. But the better question is why the friction was there. Money mined from hard rock. Pride mined from hard men. Politics mined from a town deciding what kind of town it wanted to be. Those seams run deep. They still do. History loves a clean verdict. Tombstone offers a mirror instead. In it we see law that's also anger, courage that's also stubbornness, and a story that refuses to sit still on the page. The lot behind Flies is quiet now, but if you stand there and let the wind talk, you'll hear boots, a shouted order, and two shots so close together you can't slide a playing card between them. 30 seconds, that's all. Long enough to make graves, long enough to make a legend, long enough to keep us arguing into another century. Because the West is never just where it happened. It's where we still go to measure the size of our own shadows.